All right, we're back on Play It Forward with Elisheva Novella, filmmaker, writer, director. The film is Time Skipping. Elisheva, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. I'm very happy to be talking about time skipping today. Before we do, would you like to introduce yourself for the film?
I'm Elisheva Novella. I'm the writer and director of the film Time Skipping.
Ellie, I can't help but notice that it is, and I've done this as well in my filmmaking career. I don't know, like in my 20s, and I bit off a piece about death and an old man kind of a thing. And you've done something similar, where you're pretty young and relatively speaking, and this character is not, and she loses her husband. It seems like a long stint of being a wife and mother that this character had, and she experiences something that may be a little uncommon, and that is a liberation after the death of her husband. And I don't think that's like that bizarre. It's like pretty it seems very understandable, especially in the context of history and a lot of the confines of what the roles are just in general now and then even earlier. So having said that, where did you get the inspiration for the story? How did this story come from your own life?
So it actually kind of started when I wrote a poem sort of about just the relaying of this story. It was kind of like a um about if I could skip ahead in time, um and picturing this future where you kind of made it through all the drudgery of life, and then it all comes full circle, and then you you look back and you realize you kind of just were not really living. It's like, if an event like that happens, like your husband died and say you felt restricted in your marriage, and now now that you're older, there's not as much you can do, but you look back and you're like, oh wait, this is that feeling I had all that time ago, and you're young and a child and you can just be completely free. Um, and I wrote it and I came up with it at a time that I was feeling pretty stuck. I think I think a lot of people get that feeling, especially in their late teens and early 20s, when it's really the time that you're kind of having to um, leave the past behind and kind of leave behind that feeling of freedom that you have access to only at very specific times in your life.
It's really cool. I was preparing for the call and reflecting as I was having lunch about the movie, and I was like, it's very much like a Citizen Kane movie here. It's just like here, this character has lived this whole life, and at the end, it's, this portion of their childhood that is, the experience of freedom and really the vitality of being alive in the moment. And so, something very similar going on here. And with what you said just now, and I think it's so interesting, the age which you're describing in this transition from like into, okay, you're like an adult now and you're responsible for an adult life and, creating your own income and meals and this and that. Um, and future family, being a part of that too,
Yeah.
and all those pressures. Um, yeah, it seems very natural to like kind of fast forward and see like, well, what's the end of all that, and what does that process look and feel like, and what would a successful, happy life look like versus perhaps some of the lives that you've seen around you that may have missed the mark.
Yeah, I think that's it's something you just see in a lot of older women, and I grew up just really admiring the women around me and seeing all these women who are so creative and intelligent, and just wondering like, what did they get for that? Like you feel like maybe they could have done something more, but there was just so much rooting against them that they kind of just found themselves taking care of other people, and that became their life. And that's great. It's great to take care of other people, but I think that it's kind of just encouraged in women to um, kind of push aside like the parts of ourselves that are more big, like the parts of ourselves that want to shine and want to do something drastic, and kind of letting ourselves be um, that force. Um, and then you kind of just lose it because it's like, you know, I think I've definitely experienced that feeling um like I'm not really allowed to be expressive or to care for myself over others.
Right. And so, it leads me to think, how do people go against the counterculture of the moment? What if it's the culture of, United States, or the culture of a more localized group that you're getting, or your family culture, whatever, that kind of the world culture. How do you go against that counterculture in a way that is safe, healthy, and not rebelling where you're like going to the other extreme and losing yourself?
Yeah, it's very complicated. And I mean, to be fair, I think a lot of us struggle with that. I mean, in this economy, most of us are just trying to find some way of surviving. But it's it's definitely a thin line, even just when it comes to expression, recognizing that you do want to make a difference. You want to convince people that the world deserves to be something different, but you can't go too far, or the response isn't going to be positive. It's just going to be fear, and if you don't go far enough, then no one's going to see it at all. So it's like what do you do, what do you say, so that you're actually able to sort of make those moves, and like kind of weasel your way in with what you were given.
Yeah. The second, well, maybe we can, the second question to play it forward, and I really love the phrase that you used. The world deserves to be a certain way. Maybe you said better, but let's just say the world deserves X. Um,
Mhm.
and reflecting on the character's arc in your short film, um, what did she learn, and how can we what can we take away as people watching her?
I think, well, I think that she learns her lessons a little bit late. She, I mean, it may not have been her fault. Maybe she was forced into that situation. We don't know the whole story, and it's not the goal to know the whole story. But I think when you watch what she goes through, and that immediate feeling of release, and the pain that she feels over the fact that she missed out on so much of it, I think we can learn from that and realize that we are all in the best place we'll ever be to just do what actually speaks to us, to really learn who we are. And I think that that's something that we all need to be doing. I mean, what is even the point of us being here if we're not trying to be happy? So sometimes figuring that out for oneself isn't going to be convenient. Sometimes it's slow, but really just taking that time to look at ourselves, look at what speaks to us on a deeper level. How can we live our lives more deeply? And I think that just that continued process, even if it's difficult at times, by the time you're older, you at least you know that you did those things. You don't feel like you were missing out just because you were afraid.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's so many, just traditional wisdom
Mhm.
that wisdom, whether it's religion or philosophies or it's sciences, like yoga, that are steeped in this idea of the knowledge of the self. The yoga,
Yes.
kind of calls itself a science rather than a
Hmm.
religion oftentimes, because of the kind of causal effect of it and the lawful unfolding of it. So, um, you know, it's one of the things that's inspiring about the character, and she plays it, beautifully, wonderfully.
That's
Yeah, she's great. So one of the cool things about it, and one of the really, I think probably my favorite kind of element in the movie is how quickly she processes. As further away she's getting from the grave and the burial, you observe that transition in her. And, to be able to process, oftentimes you said you wrote this where you were stuck, right? You were in a place that was stuck.
yeah.
And here this character is, well, she, whatever the past of her life was, whether, she honored the obligations or the contracts she made, or whether she was stuck in something now that she's free, or whatever that was, she relatively quickly transitions through this process on her walk as she walks home. And, in that process, she is not stuck. She's not stuck the entire time. I mean, as soon as we open on her, she is going through this transition. And, that is such an admirable place to be.
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed finding that build, and Wendy, the actress, she did a fantastic job of that. But it was interesting you brought up yoga. I mean, I'm really passionate about yoga and meditation.
Cool, me too.
Um, yeah, and I think that I mean, yeah, I do think that these sorts of there are tools out there for some of
Yeah.
us if we, if we don't want to feel like we're in that stuck, as we as we keep calling it. Um, but yeah, no, the transition was kind of I mean, I wanted to show in the graveyard scene that there was like a definitely the coldness, and it's not just about it's not just the imagery but the eyes on her. I really wanted to show that she wasn't just stuck, everyone was looking at her. She was sort of in this position socially because it, you and this is kind of another thing that I think is common for a lot of women, is feeling like we're always meant to represent something to other people, whether that's like, you know, the kind of young, like meant to represent some kind of, just like an object of attraction, or a mother or a wife, or you're always something. And everywhere you go, you kind of feel like you're just very, you're always stuck, whether you're literally stuck and you have nowhere to go and nothing to do, or you but you also feel stuck just uh, as like this entity. You feel like you have a mind. I mean, we all have minds. Our minds are working all the time. We're all human. um I think I know I have felt this a lot, where I've just felt like, okay, so I feel so deeply. Why do I feel like I go out and I'm like stuck in this body? And like the body is always kind of speaking before the mind. And so I wanted to show that kind of transition, how um, she once the husband is gone, she's able to move beyond that, and then she's like, oh wow, I don't represent anything to anyone anymore. No one even really cares about me. I'm just an old lady. That's not obviously not what I think, but in a lot of society, that's kind of how we look at old women. Um, and so that was kind of a lot of where the transition came in of just like dancing and really being able to live fully because you're no longer being perceived quite so much. You're just existing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think what you're saying is how we as socially trap one another in identities that are preconceived based on a million different variables. And so, like taking yoga, for example, as an instrument or a tool, it's like, well, to get out of that is, well, how do you identify? What is your identity in the world? And then as you navigate it, how do you not believe what others may necessarily be thinking of you and just, be true to yourself
Yeah,
and that inner voice?
right. I mean, that definitely takes work. And of course, at a certain point, we have to let go of that and understand that the world will perceive us how they will perceive us. And that's, not really our responsibility to
Yeah,
change.
yeah,
We can only know how we perceive ourselves. Um, but um, I think that that's, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of this isn't really common knowledge. I think uh, it makes me sad when I talk to people and I realize how many people are just like so stuck in what they were put in and they have no sense of being more than their bodies.
yeah. Elisheva, last question. How have you been personally changed since making time skipping?
It's been interesting. I'm like neurodivergent and I like struggled a lot with school and everything. So uh when I made time skipping, I hadn't really received a lot of uh public approval, I guess. Or like I hadn't necessarily not just approval, but confidence. I There wasn't much that I could kind of rely on to know that I was capable of completing things. Uh, so getting through that and making something that actually was substantial and that has affected people was interesting. It was kind of a kind of a change of pace. So I've really found myself in an interesting community and really gotten to meet a lot of people. It kind of changed my whole life in a lot of ways.
How wonderful. That's awesome. I mean, uh, well, I guess I just want to share a couple things. One is, one of my favorite scenes, and it's like kind of it's a comedic film, right? We should first of
Yeah.
all acknowledge that. And one of my favorite moments in the movie is when she looks back at all the people in the funeral behind her and everybody turns their head away.
Yeah.
That's a very cute and true and lovely moment. So a talented filmmaker and a very thoughtful film. And
Thank
I look forward to more of your stuff. Elisheva Novella, filmmaker, writer, director. Thank you
you.
for being on the show. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. All right, everybody at Playing Forward, peace out. We're later.
Bye.
See you. Bye, Elisheva.
Bye.